Alright, welcome back guys, welcome back for part 5. I know it's been a little while since I made a video, but I was in Europe for 2 months, so yeah, that's been good, and now I'm back to it. So episode 5, we're going to look at exactly where the subframe winds up in the car, front to back, so centering that wheel in the arch. I'm just going to use comparisons and some measurements from my car out the front, and then we'll work with the dummy car that I've got. It's definitely still going to be lots of measuring going on. I'll also look at ride height as well, and control arm angles, which are going to affect roll center. So enjoy guys. Alright, let's find a wheel. Now, years ago I did calculate the track, the rear track of this rear end over the factory R31. I think it came in at 40mm extra either side outwards. It's going to limit wheels a bit. Like, obviously I can't have any deep dish or anything, so I'll just find, I think I've got a pair of R33 stockies. So I'll grab one of those. If that doesn't clear, nothing will clear. These were the first ones I found. They should be alright. It's a 350Z front. So it's a 17x7 plus 30. So not very aggressive. Shouldn't be aggressive, looks pretty aggressive. Alright, so far so good. By eye, it looks like it's in the middle of the arch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the wheel, chock it to where it looks like it would be at ride height, and then just take some measurements, get a feel for it. At this stage it looks good. Alright, I'll use that for the ride height. Another thing that I want to look at is the angle of this control arm, how it sits at ride height, because obviously that affects your roll center, and with this being a different height potentially from the car, that could change this. So just another thing to consider. At the moment it has a shit ton of camber. What I might do is go check out my car out the front. It's got a ride height very similar to this, and the offset of the wheels are pretty close. Take some measurements, see where that's sitting. At the moment it looks like it could come forward a bit, so we'll see. Okay, so I'm out the front at the moment. This is just on the taken on my phone. Got the laser level out here, makes the garden look pretty cool. Alright, so I've set the laser level up directly in line with the center of the wheel. These are actually Evo 7 stockies. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use this join in the body as a reference line. So I'll take that measurement and then we'll go back in the shed. Okay, so we're a bit closer to the ground. The distance to the join line, which you can see on this car, 60mm. And I know that distance is going to change depending on, obviously, imagine the chassis rails tilt this way and this way, but for this it's close enough. So there's our join line. It has been bashed a little bit, but it still looks like it's in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back 60mm and see where it intersects where the wheel is. So the distance between that center and there is, fucking, it's not much. 10 mil? Get about 72. So call it 70. So it's going to go 10 mil up, 10 mil forward. Interesting. Probably worth noting, although I didn't tighten up the bolts, if I just take the weight off this, there's no forward and backwards play. So that's where it sits. So I've actually jumped a week into the future. As you saw, the wheel didn't quite end up where I wanted it to be. Out of curiosity, I did put the other side on, the arms on the other side, and it worked out perfectly. So I figured something was wrong. So it was either where I put the bracket, the car that I'm working on is bent, or the subframe's bent, because I knew the arms were straight. So what I actually did is I put the arms on the 33 rear end, put that in the car, and it works out perfectly. So this just left me with finding another non-real steering subframe. Managed to find one really quick, so figured that out on Friday. It's now Tuesday, and I've got a new one right behind the camera, so I'll show you that now. So here it is, number 3, the third subframe I've bought. It came from a straight car. Saw the car, it was actually out of a R34 naturally aspirated, because obviously they don't have real steering. Overall looks pretty good. Still got all the factory bushings in it. Also got the handbrake cables, because I needed those as well. It doesn't look like it's been sitting around. I think it's been wrecked fairly recently. It had some front end damage to the car. Something that will be a pain. I had pressed the solid subframe bushings into the other one, which is now junk, so I'll have to get those out. In the meantime, I also did find out that the location where the subframe sits in the car isn't ideal with those bushings. You can actually get what's called subframe riser bushings. I think they're known by a few names. I'll just go and show you those now. Okay, so the bushes I went with was these GK Tech ones. I've bought a few things from these guys before. They're pretty good. And these bushes are a little bit different to the other ones, mainly because they're one piece. For anybody interested, they also come with some washers. We won't need those, they'll be too small. So it's just a similar kind of thing to the previous one. Obviously, yeah, like I said, just one piece. These holes here just serve as to make the part a bit lighter, I guess. So the idea behind these is you press them in. The flange obviously goes on this side, and this part here, the idea is this face here sits flush with the edge of this, so effectively you're going to be able to put the subframe 15mm closer to the car, and what that will do is it'll affect your roll center, so that when you lower the car, the control arm angles are at the right angle. So at the moment we're just looking from the rear of the car. What I actually did was I had a look at I got in trouble for this last time, my girlfriend's 34 in the driveway, just to have a look at the angle that this control arm sat on in comparison to what was the ground. So I've actually got this set up level. So what I actually found was, I don't know how well that comes across in the camera, but the control arm slightly sloped in this direction. So if we just focus on the rear part of it here, slightly in this direction as opposed to this direction. So what I've tried to do here is mimic the angle that that the 34 was sitting on. I think I've got it pretty close. It was just, what I'll do is I'll show you a comparison photo. So that's what it looked like in the 34. And then again, this is what it looks like here. So keeping that in mind, because the ride height of the 34, it's not slammed. It might be lowered, but it wouldn't be lowered more than 10-20 mil maybe. So I figured that's a good place to start. Plug that angle into this and see where it puts the wheel. So how high in the guard that puts it. Remembering, like keeping in mind that this is as low as we can put the subframe in the car while still having clearance to be able to put brackets on the front. So that's our limitation here. So basically that's where it sits, with the control arm sitting in what we'll call ideal position. That is fucking ridiculous. That is so high. Obviously I've only got the rubber ones in at the moment. It's probably slightly better with the aluminium ones that I had in the bent subframe, but any improvement is going to help out here. So that's why I opted for the subframe riser bushes, basically just to try and correct some of the roll center that'll happen from me lowering this. So when I pressed in the blue bushings on the bent subframe, obviously I'd removed the factory bushings and shells years ago, but now that I have to do it again, I'll probably get it on camera, so I'll run you through that. Meanwhile, I'll put the riser bushings, I'll put them in the freezer, so hopefully it makes them a little bit easier to get in when we go to press them in. So for this process, I'll have to remove all the arms off the new subframe. Basically, we're going to be using a torch. It gets pretty hot and I don't want to melt any of the good bushings in the arms. So my weapons of choice for this: swivel head ratcheting 17, 19, one of these bad boys. 0 offset heads on these, extra long. I actually found out about these from a YouTube channel called Eric the Car Guy. He did a toolbox, like, you know, show and tell kind of thing. And if you have a Skyline, I would highly recommend one of these. 17, 19, so common on suspension, brakes. Yeah, it's awesome. Alright, let's get to it. Okay, so I've actually got the subframe outside now, ready to burn out the bushes. There is a couple of ways to do this. You can either burn the centers out, cut them, and then kind of bash them out. I have seen people just bash them around the outside. I I don't want to risk bending it, so I know this way works. Might take a bit longer, but we're just going to go ahead and burn them out now. Luckily for me, I do have a patch in my backyard that has nothing there, so in this case it's actually an advantage. So I'm just going to use one of these. Obviously in an ideal world you'd probably have the tools to press these out. Obviously you need a receiver cup big enough. I didn't have one, so that's why we're burning them out. Once you're at this stage where they just want to burn, when they start to die down, I mean these are all cooking at the moment, all you got to do is give them a bit of a stir. Obviously watch out. Probably worth noting, I've still got the factory rubber diff bushings in here. This isn't hot at all. I mean, it's a tiny bit warm, but they'll be fine. Okay, I've just got the subframe on a little table here outside. I've just got a bit of a blanket underneath just to catch all this shit so it doesn't get on the pavers. I'm going to try and use this. I've actually weighted the subframe down a bit. All you've basically got to do is cut through this lip out here. Make sure you obviously don't cut into the actual subframe. And the bottom's similar, but instead of flaring out, it kind of folds under. So you can see here, I've cut all the way through the top where I've just hit the outside of the subframe. This bottom bit down the bottom, that's all cut through. Right up the top here on this face, just gone through, and at the bottom there's heaps of meat left in the middle. I'm going to see if I can bash it. You don't need to cut all the way through because it will usually split as long as you've got at least enough. So we'll see if that's enough. Okay, I ended up having to take it outside and lean it up against the wall just so you can put something underneath it and bash it around, and yeah, it needs support basically. So that's what it looks like when it came out. It didn't quite split all the way through, so it was a bit of a pain in the ass, so I'll cut the next one a bit better. So these little bits up the front here, of all the subframes that I've got, they're only on the Skyline ones, they're not on the Sylvia ones. I think they're going to get in the way a bit, so I'm just going to chop them off this one. Alright, to press these bushes in, I'm going to use, I bought a set of these, so it's just a cheap Chinese kit for pressing in and out bushings. So I think it came with, I don't know, maybe 15 of them, maybe 20, and all different size threaded rods. So it's similar to what I was doing the other day, except these actually have little ball bearings in a race there, so reduce friction. So we'll see how we go with this. Alright, just taking these out the freezer. Frosty. Okay, so the plan is, gotta make sure we put these in the right way. Obviously they go this way. Get them the wrong way. It's gonna be fun getting them out. That's actually a lot harder than it looks. Okay, here's just a couple of observations I've made that they're not throwing me off, but they're making me consider whether this thing's straight or not. So every time I've put a subframe in the car, any of the three basically, we've always had a bit of clearance on this side. So between this member here and the actual mounting point for the front of the subframe, there's always been more room on this side. So I'll show you the other side for comparison. I've just got this straight edge at the moment. It's just sitting hard up against these tabs here. So you can see the same thing over there. Measuring these, the other side's 10mm, this side's 17. So whether the car's bent or that's how they're manufactured, or it's just this one, I don't know. But after taking a few measurements, I think that well, it's obviously not the subframe because they're all in that position. I don't think it's where I've put the mount. One thing I have noticed as well is it's been the same amongst the three subframes as well, is whenever I mount it in the car, it always wants to sit off this rail about 15mm more than the opposite rail. That's most definitely the car, because obviously if it's the same between subframes, it's not that. And I'm pretty confident that this member here, I mean the rail that I'm referencing is here. I'm heaps confident that that's flat. So obviously there's some weird things going on with the car that we have to think about as well. So now that I've got all the bushes pressed into the subframe, immediately put it in the car and started taking some measurements. Now I found when I had either the rear, depending on how you're looking at it, either the rear or the front mounts, either or, when I had those sitting level with the car, the other ones wouldn't line up. And what I've actually found is I've had a bit of a play with the angle cube, and I've had this up this way and turned it over, done the same measurements. These, if you drew a line straight up from these holes, they're not actually parallel to one another. In this plane. So I was using the faces of these as a reference. I'm just going to have to pick one basically, and I think I'm going to end up picking these ones that sit towards the front of the car, obviously because that'll give me more clearance and I can ultimately sit this thing lower. We're only talking about 1 degree. I think the angle cube said it was 0.85 of a degree on one side, 0.90. So I think it's how it's been made. It's not bent that way. It's pretty close, but that's another thing that we've got to keep in mind. Just one more thing that I didn't consider until after, I guess, and I had a look. Because we've moved or removed the flanges from up here, there's no extra height. So I was concerned that some of this reinforcement here for the tow rods, it might stick up further than this. So I don't know how well you can see that, but in there it's probably 1/4 mil clearance, so that's fine. Even if it was the same, it would be okay, just as long as it's not higher, but that'll work out fine. The support that I've made, it is basically this format. It's a flat piece of steel that goes from one to the other. I think in the factory cars they run a it's like a landing. So it's a separate pad that comes from the car, just supporting these parts here. A little bit different. Alright, so I got all the arms on. I actually put these, they're actually 33 GTR stockies on there, just so I can get closer to the guards. Mainly so I can compare either side, make sure we were sitting the same distance out either side. Looks good. The subframe looks 100% straight, and now on both sides about 61 mil, and that's exactly what it is out the front on my car. So looks like the measurements were good. So at this stage, it's looking like it's worked out perfectly. At one stage, it was looking like I was going to have to replace this one, so make these sides again, and it was going to have to move forward. And I accidentally made this too low. In the end, it's turned out absolutely perfect because of the difference in levels between these front ones and the ones at the back. Just, it works out. Now that I've got a straight subframe, the wheel's locating where I planned it to go. The only thing that will need changing, now just zoom in to show you. I know it's a little bit dark, but just in here, that's the upper control arm, so your camber adjustment bolt, and obviously this is in the way. I can get the bolt through, I just can't get the washer and the nut on. So what I'll end up doing is just chopping this across here, and we'll just like bevel it down towards the rail. So other than that, it's all looking good, and then we can move on to the front mounts. I hope you found that informative. As I had alluded to previously, the car it did make it, so it works out. I've been driving around, and within probably, I don't know, the first 5Ks, I actually blew a turbo. So it's a bit of bad luck, but opportunity to upgrade. So this is what I'm looking at upgrading to. It's a Garrett G25 660 with a 0.92 rear on it. It's just got a bit of a 3 to 4 inch transition for the dump on it as well at the moment. So let me know in the comments below if you'd be interested in watching a series on fitting this. And I'd also like to hear, do you like the format? Like, do you like the technical detail that I go into, or would you prefer like a more like condensed version? Thanks guys, cheers.